all of the interests you've talked about thus far is like public health, there's like research, there's design and media arts. Did you ever feel like kind of like pulled in different directions? Because they are kind of like different skill sets, different like time commitments. So I'm just wondering how you like navigated your way through all of those interests.
Right, right. Great question. And it kind of goes back to my point about not liking to make decisions. I think that's a big part of it, but also it's sort of a boon because it means that I've spent a lot of time trying to maintain a lot of these skills, um, and just exploring to see where it goes. I think when you have so many interests, you absolutely are sometimes, pulled apart in different directions, and that's something you do kind of have to accept that sometimes you're not going to be able to perform at the same level as someone who's only focused on one. You might only be able to get to say 80% of what they're doing. And that's okay because you're also going to be able to apply that perspective to many different disciplines and take a very multidisciplinary approach to these questions. Because, for instance, as I've been saying, science doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's not only in the lab, it's going to extend and trickle down. You can think of so many things such as the internet that have trickled down into our daily lives. Being able to approach it from so many different angles will always help. And especially, if you see a complicated case, be able to, steal a skill set from, say, sports or steal a skill set from the art side, public health will always help. And I think, for us as PHA, a lot of us are interested in medicine, but when we are residents, when we are attendings, when we're even medical students, we're likely going to be working with social workers. And so making sure that we all speak the same language, that we can understand how to best help our social workers so they can best help us. Like if we're meeting a patient and we see these sort of cues that we know we can tell it precisely to the social worker, this might be what you're looking out for. Makes everyone's lives easier. It makes us better at helping our patients. And so there's benefits, there's always going to be benefits to taking multiple lenses to something.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your words are really reassuring to hear, Alex, because I always feel like I hear the phrase like jack of all trades, master of none. But like, I feel like the point that you raise is very important, which is that kind of this interdisciplinary perspective is a huge advantage to have in society and for the benefit of society and for innovations going forward. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now that you're kind of at this stable point in your life, like would you, when you look back on your life thus far, like are there any reflections like you have? So anything you feel proudest of or anything maybe you would have done differently if you had the chance to go back?
Right, right. I think a lot of it, things work out the way they do. Um, you know, I think that's the biggest part. Remember to have fun and to trust the process. I think a lot of times when we're young, for instance, we see, you're leading up to this big application, let's just say college applications. You're leading up to this big application, you kind of forget that there's still life afterwards and that, something will happen. You'll do great regardless of what happens. And just, spending times with friends, with family and doing things that you find fun is probably the most important part of it all. I think that's what you'll remember. That's what I remember with PHA, not only the patients that I've been able to work with, but also, the doctors who've shown us great mentorship, the entire community that's been fostered. A lot of that's what you come back and remember. And, when you do come back to write an application a second time, that's what exactly comes across on the page. And so um it's a mixture of things. I know there's a lot of uncertainty always with this process, but focus on treasuring the certain things that you have. And I think that you'll always go far with that.
Yeah, definitely. Um, yeah. How about for you specifically, Alex? Like, I feel like you shared a lot of great advice, but you're obviously a very, very accomplished person. You've achieved a lot in your time in like undergrad, and you're bound to achieve a lot more going forward. But what would you say maybe was something that you're most proudest of?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I realized I said a lot, but forgot to answer the question. Yeah, I think it's always mentoring. I think just taking my experience in the lab, for instance, towards the end of my senior year, and there were a bunch of underclassmen that had joined, and being able to sort of show them the ropes on some of the procedures I had done, 2 years, 3 years prior, having to sort of refresh my memory on doing some of them because it had been a while. But mentoring them, showing them, what all the machines did, why we did each step, and then them coming back to me saying that, hey, have you ever tried doing this? And sort of coming up with their own little shortcuts and techniques and learning them slowly integrating with the lab. That's always a big point of pride. And you see that with every single org. You see that in PHA, you see that in the lab, you see that with all the other orgs you're going to be a part of and I've been a part of. And so yeah, I think that's mentorship's always the biggest thing.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely, I feel like when I was younger, like I was always receiving mentorship, but now it's getting to an age where I'm transitioning to providing that. So it's like a very interesting experience. And also, as you said, super rewarding.
Right. And you're still going to receive mentorship. Like, we don't know what the hell we're doing.
Oh my,
Okay, am I going to get fined by the FTC? No. But anyway, yeah, I mean, you're going to receive a lot of mentorship, a lot of the PIs, the doctors that I have met and that you're going to meet as well. They absolutely understand where we are as sort of confused undergraduates, as confused med students. And so the least we can do is take their advice, take their help, and then pass it on.
yeah. Guess I wanted to kind of have another question, Alex, where it's like, what are you maybe excited about going forward, maybe for the next couple or several years?
Right. I'm looking forward to graduating.
Oh, that's a long time, Alex. Not gonna lie.
That's a cheat answer, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just, meeting a lot of new people who will challenge the way I think about some of these problems, research questions, but how do I understand and how do I best help patients? Having them, teach me what they've learned and expand my way of approaching these problems, I'm very excited for. Um, and yeah, I think it's going to be a period of growth, not just professionally, but also outside of it. I've made a deal with like one of the other postback in my lab, who's also headed off to MD, PhD programs that we're both going to run a marathon at some point. And so,
Gosh.
yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna do that, stuff like that, challenge ourselves and I don't know, whatever happens, happens. But I'm excited to see what will happen.
Okay. Dang. Running a marathon though. Oh my God. Okay, let me know how it goes. Oh my gosh.
Yes. But I think, once you've started training and like you run your first race, it's like the energy, like I ran I think I mentioned this at the alumni panel, but I ran like DC's like cherry blossom 10 mile. It's sort of their huge celebration of spring. And the vibes are always great at these races. There's a lot of people, cheering the runners on. Everyone's super positive. It's a great environment and it's like a mark of accomplishment. It's not just about the race itself, but the 3 4 months or however amount of time you've put in to get ready for the race. And you show up the morning of and like, hey, I can do it. I did it. This is something I put my mind to. And so a lot of it kind of comes together. So
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, thank you so much for speaking with me today, Alex. It was
thank you for
pleasure
having
to
me.
learn about all of like the things you've been up to, where you're headed, your reflections, everything.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
So that was our first alumni spotlight with Alex Wu. Thank you so much for listening and stay tuned for the next one.